What Burkina Faso's security minister just revealed is so disturbing that it forces you to stop and ask, what on earth is really happening inside Burkina Faso? Listen to this carefully first, then we'll talk.
Tout propos, permettez-moi de rendre un hommage mérité.
I do not address this conspiracy with casual words, because what we dismantled was seconds away from tearing the nation apart. What was uncovered was not rumor, not panic, but a cold, deliberate operation designed to fracture the state from within. Fear was meant to be the spark, betrayal the fuel. Intelligence confirmed a ruthless blueprint, remove key civil and military figures through precision killings, calculated not for chaos alone but for maximum paralysis. Each target was chosen to leave a vacuum, to spread hesitation, to force the country into confusion. 2 execution paths were mapped out, both lethal. One involved a direct, close-range attack on Captain Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso. The other planned to turn his own residence into a death trap. And this was only the beginning. A wider list followed: officers, administrators, coordinators, people whose absence would cripple command and weaken national defense. Speed and surprise were central, but the most dangerous element was access from within. Our investigation revealed money changing hands, payments disguised as logistics and support, used to buy loyalty away from the Republic. As surveillance expanded, a disturbing pattern emerged: active personnel connected to actors operating beyond our borders. At that moment, the true scale became undeniable. This was not an isolated betrayal. It was an organized attempt to hijack the state. Arrests are underway. Confessions are being recorded. Some have admitted their involvement. Others describe how they were recruited, manipulated, convinced they were serving a so-called higher purpose. The people must understand this without distortion. The state moved before blood was spilled. The president survived an imminent threat. Order was preserved. Calm must prevail. Daily life must continue. Burkina Faso did not fall. Burkina Faso stood firm. Long live Burkina Faso.
The plot was surgical. 19 names, 19 targets, all handpicked, all essential to the survival of Burkina Faso's current government. At the top of the list, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. The plan wasn't just to kill him. It was to decapitate the entire state apparatus in a single coordinated strike. Shootings, bombs, maximum shock, maximum paralysis. This wasn't rebellion. This was regime liquidation disguised as political action. And it nearly happened. Burkina Faso has been walking a tightrope since Traoré seized power in September 2022, his second coup in less than a year. He didn't rise through traditional channels. He rose through urgency, through frustration, through a military that believed its leadership had lost the plot against jihadist insurgents tearing through the Sahel. Traoré became the face of a new military doctrine, one that rejected France, embraced Russia, and promised to take the fight to armed groups that had killed thousands and displaced over 2 million. He's young, he's hardline, and he's made enemies. This assassination plot wasn't improvised. It was methodical. 19 officials means 19 calculated eliminations, each one designed to remove a pillar holding up the state. You take out the president. You take out the defense minister. You take out key intelligence chiefs, regional commanders, loyalist governors. You don't just create a vacuum. You create confusion. And in confusion, coups succeed. In confusion, foreign actors move in. In confusion, entire nations collapse. The plan reportedly involved a combination of shootings and bombings, tactics that suggest external coordination, or at the very least, access to resources beyond what a ragtag opposition could muster. This points to something deeper. Burkina Faso has become a battleground not just for jihadists, but for competing geopolitical interests. France, pushed out after decades of influence, still has allies inside the country. Neighboring states, anxious about military rule spreading, have their own concerns. And then there's the question of who benefits most from Traoré's removal. The answer isn't simple, but the options are troubling. If this plot had succeeded, Burkina Faso would have woken up to a leadership void at the worst possible moment. The country is already fighting an insurgency on multiple fronts. It's already isolated diplomatically after leaving ECOWAS and pivoting toward military juntas in Mali and Niger. It's already facing inflation, food insecurity, and a population that's exhausted. Now imagine all of that without a functioning command structure. Imagine military units unsure who to report to. Imagine regional governors scrambling for survival. Imagine foreign powers rushing to stabilize the situation on their own terms. That's not a crisis. That's a free fall. What makes this even more volatile is the symbolism. Traore isn't just a president. He's a symbol of resistance to Western influence in Francophone Africa. His survival, his defiance, his rhetoric, all of it plays into a larger narrative that's reshaping the Sahel. Killing him wouldn't just remove a leader. It would send a message. And depending on who sent it, that message could ignite something far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. The state has since announced arrests. Investigations are ongoing, but the damage to trust is already done. Traore now knows there are forces, internal or external, willing to go this far. His inner circle knows they were on a list. And the military, already paranoid, already battle-hardened, is now looking inward. That shift in focus, from external threats to internal purges, could reshape the entire political climate. Loyalty will be rewarded. Suspicion will be fatal. And governance will become even more centralized, even more militarized. 100 million CFA francs. That's roughly 160,000 US dollars. Not a fortune by global standards, but in Burkina Faso, it's enough to buy loyalty, silence, and access to the inner circles of power. Intelligence reports now confirm that this money didn't come from within. It came from outside, and it was allegedly coordinated by a man who once held the exact position he was trying to destroy. Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, the exiled former leader now operating from beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Damiba isn't just a disgruntled ex-president. He's a military officer who overthrew the previous government in January 2022, promising to restore security and defeat jihadist insurgents. 8 months later, he was overthrown himself by Captain Ibrahim Traoré in a coup that accused him of failing to deliver on those very promises. Damiba fled. Traoré stayed. And now, from exile, Damiba is allegedly orchestrating a revenge plot that could have rewritten the country's entire political future. This isn't just about power. It's about legitimacy, survival, and who gets to define what comes next for Burkina Faso. The intelligence findings paint a clear picture: external direction, internal execution. Damiba, operating from abroad, allegedly funneled foreign-backed funds into Burkina Faso to bribe retired military officers and collaborators still embedded within the system. These weren't random recruits. They were insiders. People who knew the schedules, the security protocols, the vulnerabilities. People who could move freely, communicate discreetly, and position themselves close enough to strike. That's the danger of exile politics. The leader may be gone, but the network remains. And when that network is reactivated with foreign cash, it becomes a weapon. The use of retired officers is particularly significant. These are men who once wore the uniform, who still have relationships within the barracks, who understand military culture and hierarchy. They're not outsiders trying to infiltrate. They're ghosts of the old guard, moving through a system that still recognizes their faces. And when you combine that access with financial incentives in a country where military salaries are low and inflation is rising, you create the conditions for betrayal. 100 million CFA francs goes a long way when it's divided among a few key players willing to risk everything for a payout and a promise of restored influence. But here's where the stakes become clear. The mention of foreign-backed funds raises the question that Burkina Faso's government will now be asking loudly. Who paid? Damiba is in exile, but exile isn't free. Someone is hosting him. Someone is funding him. Someone sees value in destabilizing Traoré's government. Is this a former colonial power trying to reassert influence after being pushed out? Is this a regional neighbor anxious about the spread of military rule? Or is this a proxy conflict, with larger geopolitical players using Burkina Faso as a chessboard? The answers matter because they determine what comes next. If foreign powers are financing coups and assassination plots in the Sahel, then this isn't just about Burkina Faso. It's about whether sovereignty means anything in a region where military governments are trying to break free from decades of external control. Traoré has aligned with Russia, rejected French influence, and positioned himself as part of a new axis of military-led states alongside Mali and Niger. If Damiba's plot had succeeded, that alignment could have collapsed. A new government, installed through chaos and foreign money, would have been indebted to whoever funded the operation. And that shifts the entire balance of power in West Africa. What happens next could redefine the region. Burkina Faso's government now has names, evidence, and a narrative of foreign interference. It will use that narrative to justify crackdowns, purges, and tighter control. It will also use it to rally nationalist sentiment, painting itself as the victim of external sabotage. Whether that's entirely true or strategically convenient doesn't matter. Perception is power. And right now, Traore holds the microphone. They were offered money. They were offered guarantees. They were offered a way out if things went wrong. And they said no. That refusal is the only reason Captain Ibrahim Traoré is still alive. The only reason Burkina Faso didn't wake up to 19 bodies and a collapsing state. Intelligence services detected the plot. Security details stayed loyal. And a conspiracy that should have worked didn't. The question now is whether that loyalty was the exception or the new rule in a military that's been tested, fractured, and rebuilt multiple times in less than 3 years. Burkina Faso's military has seen 2 coups since 2022. It's been accused of inefficiency, corruption, and complicity in the face of jihadist violence. Officers have been sidelined, reassigned, or imprisoned based on suspicion alone. Trust is scarce. Paranoia is standard. Yet when it mattered most, when retired officers with foreign cash came calling, the soldiers closest to Traore held the line. That's not automatic. That's deliberate. And it tells you something about how power is being consolidated inside the barracks right now. The plotters made a critical miscalculation. They assumed that everyone has a price. In a country where inflation is rising, where military salaries haven't kept pace with the cost of survival, where soldiers are dying in ambushes far from home, that assumption wasn't unreasonable. But Traore's inner circle isn't just bound by salary. It's bound by ideology, by a shared belief that the old system failed and that this government, however imperfect, represents something different. These are the officers who carried out the September 2022 coup. They removed Damiba because they believed he wasn't serious about fighting the insurgency. They elevated Traore because he was. And now, when Damiba tried to buy his way back in, they remembered why they pushed him out in the first place. This is where the stakes become clear. Loyalty in a military junta isn't just about personal allegiance. It's about survival. If Traore falls, everyone connected to him falls with him. There's no soft landing for coup plotters who lose. There's exile, prison, or worse. So when intelligence services uncovered the conspiracy, they weren't just protecting a president. They were protecting themselves, their futures, and the legitimacy of a government they helped create. That's a different kind of loyalty. It's transactional, but it's also structural. And in Burkina Faso right now, structure is what's keeping the state intact. The intelligence apparatus deserves attention here. Burkina Faso's security services have been criticized for years as underfunded, infiltrated, and reactive rather than proactive. Yet they detected this plot before any violence occurred. That suggests either a significant upgrade in capability or a network of informants deep enough to catch wind of foreign money moving through retired military channels. Either way, it's a warning to anyone else considering similar plans. The state is watching, and it's watching more effectively than it used to. But intelligence alone doesn't stop a coup. People do. The soldiers who refused bribes, who reported suspicious contacts, who stayed loyal when staying loyal was the harder choice. Those are the ones who made the difference. Traore's current generation of soldiers, many of them young, many of them shaped by the failures of previous leaderships, seems to have internalized a different ethos. They've seen what happens when officers prioritize personal gain over national security. They've buried colleagues killed by jihadists while politicians and generals played power games in the capital. And they're not interested in going back to that. Arrests are underway. Confessions are being extracted. Financial audits are tracing every cent of the 100 million CFA francs that nearly bought a regime change. And now, Burkina Faso's government has done something that turns this from a domestic security incident into a regional diplomatic flashpoint. It has formally demanded the extradition of Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba. That demand isn't just paperwork. It's a declaration. It's Ouagadougou telling the world that exile is no longer a shield, that orchestrating violence from abroad will have consequences, and that the rules of the game in the Sahel have changed. Extradition requests in Africa are rarely successful. They require cooperation from the host country, legal frameworks that often don't exist, and political will that's almost never there. But that's not the point. The point is the signal. By naming Damiba publicly, by accusing him of directing an assassination plot, by demanding he be returned to face justice, Burkina Faso is doing 2 things at once. It's rallying nationalist sentiment at home, and it's putting pressure on whichever country is hosting him. If that country refuses, it risks being labeled a sponsor of destabilization. If it complies, it sets a precedent that could haunt other exiled leaders across the region. Either way, Burkina Faso wins the narrative. The arrests and confessions are the foundation of that narrative. State media is already broadcasting details. Retired officers, foreign funds, detailed plans. The government isn't hiding this. It's amplifying it, because every confession reinforces the story that Traoré's administration is under siege, that enemies both internal and external are working together to destroy the revolution, and that only vigilance and unity can protect what's been built. Whether every confession was obtained through legitimate interrogation or through methods that cross ethical lines is a question that won't be asked loudly inside Burkina Faso right now. What matters is the political utility of the confessions, not the conditions under which they were given. Financial audits are another layer. Following the money isn't just about accountability. It's about exposure. If the funds came from a foreign government, that government's involvement becomes undeniable. If they came from private backers with ties to multinational corporations or intelligence agencies, that opens a different line of inquiry. And if the money passed through regional financial networks in neighboring countries, it implicates those countries as either complicit or incompetent. The audits are forensic, but they're also political. Every transaction uncovered is another piece of evidence that Burkina Faso can use to justify closer ties with Russia, tighter control over civil society, or more aggressive rhetoric toward former colonial powers. This is where the stakes become clear. The government's response isn't just about punishing conspirators. It's about defining what the revolution means and who its enemies are. Traoré has positioned himself as the leader of a movement, not just a country. A movement that rejects Western interference, that embraces pan-Sahelian solidarity, and that's willing to use force to defend its sovereignty. The exposure of this plot gives him the crisis he needs to tighten that narrative. Internal betrayal proves that the old guard can't be trusted. External manipulation proves that foreign powers haven't given up. And the loyalty of the current military proves that the revolution has popular legitimacy within the institutions that matter most. The reference to the wider Sahel being united and alert is significant. Burkina Faso isn't alone in this. Mali and Niger, both led by military juntas, both aligned against ECOWAS, both skeptical of Western influence, are watching closely. If one of them falls to a foreign-backed coup, the others are next. So when Burkina Faso demands extradition, when it publicizes confessions, when it frames this as a fight for sovereignty, it's speaking to a regional audience. It's saying that the Sahel is no longer a collection of weak states vulnerable to external pressure. It's saying that the new military governments are coordinated, informed, and willing to defend each other. What happens next could redefine the region. If Damiba is extradited, it sets a precedent that Exile offers no protection. If he's not, it confirms that foreign powers are shielding him, which Traoré will use to justify deeper alignment with Moscow and Beijing. Either outcome strengthens his position. And that's the real consequence of this plot. It didn't just fail. It gave the government exactly the crisis it needed to consolidate power, purge opposition, and rewrite the rules.